My name's Clay Newcomb. I'm from Western Arkansas. I live in Northwest Arkansas, but I grew up in Mena, which is about 2 hours south of here in the Ouachita Mountains. Now I live in the Ozark Mountains. And I grew up in a hunting home. My dad was a big bow hunter. He made us bow hunt. He wouldn't let us hunt with rifles. He kind of put us through the Gary Newcomb School of Hard Knocks when it came to hunting. Two of my brothers didn't make it. I made it. That's kind of a true story. My brothers, great guys, and they do love the outdoors, but they're not big hunters. But my dad, he's 72. He's still a big hunter. And so we grew up hunting whitetails, really, in Arkansas, turkey hunting and whitetail hunting and coon hunting. I've been a coon hunter since I was 14. We got our first dogs. But yeah, so in 2001, I killed my first bear here in Arkansas. And that kind of opened the door for me to bear hunting, which was kind of unique because the hunting culture in Arkansas, because of the fact that there weren't bears here for basically 70 years, they were extirpated from the state. Because they weren't here, like the bear hunting culture died. Essentially, it died. And with it kind of came the respect for bears died. That's what I felt like. And I killed a bear in 2001 when they kind of liberalized the seasons a little bit because the populations were getting so high. And I really have been hooked ever since. And I think it was actually because I didn't start out hunting bears that I kind of developed this passion for bears because they fit so well into my hunting world, you know. But so that's kind of the beginning part of the bear deal. 7 years ago, from a professional standpoint and kind of from a experience standpoint, 7 years ago, I acquired Bear Hunting Magazine, which Bear Hunting Magazine is the only print bear hunting magazine in the world. And with that opportunity, kind of the doors of the bear hunting world have opened to me, and I've been able to hunt really in some of the best places in the world for black bear. Not all of them, but certainly many of the best places in the world for black bear, and hunted brown bear in Alaska twice. And so I've seen kind of the full breadth of black bear hunting, which is pretty cool and pretty unique to big game hunting in North America because black bears are spread out so far geographically that there's different ways that we hunt them. You know, in the West, it's all about spot and stalk hunting. In the Appalachians and even up in the UP where some of the Michigan guys are at, I mean, hound hunting is a big deal, you know, in thick forested areas where you're not going to be able to spot and stalk bears. And then in other places, guys are hunting them over bait. And so I have kind of devoted my professional career to becoming a connoisseur of all things bear hunting. So that means I've dove deep into the bear hound world and dove deep into the tactics and the nuances of baiting bears, and am now really getting into Western spot and stalk bear hunting. I've been taking my mules out west the last several years. So that's kind of my experience. My favorite place to hunt bears in the world, and I've been, like I said, I've been to some of the best places there are. My favorite place to hunt a bear is right here in Arkansas. Hunting them in the national forest with a traditional bow, trying to just what I call slip hunt. Some people call it still hunt. You might call it spot and stalk hunting, but our woods are so thick. To me, it's the most challenging hunt that I do. If you turned me loose anywhere in the world and said, where is probably the most difficult place, I would say it's here. And because of that, and because it's close to home, I love that challenge. And the biggest bears that I've ever killed, you'll never guess which state. The biggest bears, and I'm talking skull size and weight. So I've got a list of places I've hunted. I've hunted British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, Alaska, Montana, New Mexico, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Georgia, and West Virginia. Who can pick out the state that I've killed? It's two different bears. So, you know, when you judge a bear, Boone and Crockett and Pope and Young would measure the skull. So biggest skull, but also biggest weight. Any guesses? Tennessee. Okay, Kevin Harris saying Tennessee. Anybody else guess? You got to pick an obscure place, okay? Because if I'm making a big deal about it, it's not going to be like Alaska. Georgia. Kevin knows the answer to this, I think. Oklahoma. Yeah, Kevin got it right. Oklahoma has a very limited bear season. It's only been open for about 9 years. And up until this year, there were only 4 counties in Oklahoma that were open for bear hunting. And I killed a 550-pound bear 2 years ago in Oklahoma. And the bear did not make the Boone and Crockett record books. A bear that I killed on the same property in 2015 that weighed 360 pounds had a Boone and Crockett skull. So both of my big bears came from Oklahoma. So I love Oklahoma, which is such an most people don't even know there's a bear season there. But so that's kind of an introduction to me. I mean, I've got some notes here. I'm a writer, I'm a videographer, I'm a filmmaker. I like training mules. I love messing with hounds. I feel like I'm a connoisseur of rural life, and especially how it pertains to how hunting has influenced our culture. I'm 40 years old. I turned 40 this year, and I realized kind of what I'm trying to do sometimes when I interview. We have a podcast and stuff, and I like interviewing these old guys or just people that are really connected to place in a deep way. Those are the kind of people I like to talk to. And I've kind of distilled down why I like to talk to those people is I am interested in finding the relevance of modern hunting in a very modern, technological, concrete, urbanized world like we live in. So I think that's what we're trying to do as hunters is find our relevance and make that narrative strong inside of the broader culture, really, to preserve North American hunting. And when I talk to these, being a connoisseur of rural culture, like I like to see how, hunting has changed the way people live in a positive way. So that's the introduction to me. I've got a few things that we could talk about. I am interested in hearing if you guys had any specific questions. Let me just read a couple of the topics that I've kind of specced out that I get a lot of questions about. But I'll let your questions guide what we talk about if you have some. Number one is when to hunt. Talking spring and fall. There's nuanced differences in the timing. When to hunt, where to hunt. There's, I think there's 9 states that have a spring season, a bunch of other states that have fall seasons. Canada, we could talk about all that. The bear rut. The bear rut is probably my go-to conversation default thing when I'm in a conversation and things start getting slim. I start talking about the bear rut and delayed implantation in sow bears. It's kind of my social crutch. That's a joke, but bear biology and the rut, all that is like fascinating and really has implications for hunting that if you're a bear hunter, I think you need to know about. What to do with bear meat. I'm not a great chef, but we do use a lot of bear meat. We use bear oil. We could talk about that, or we could talk about rendering bear fat. So does anybody have specific questions?
Matt was asking, why do some states allow spring hunting and others only do for the fall? Are more states on the cusp of starting a spring season?
I know nothing about bear hunting. I'm just curious why that is.
Matt, it's management decisions that are individually made by the states that have to do with their ability to harvest the amount of bears that they need to harvest to make that population thrive. Most game agencies, as I understand them to work, they're less interested in just trying to create great opportunity for hunters, or there's this balance of when they're trying to create great opportunity for hunters, but they're also just trying to meet their management goals. So if they can harvest, the number of bears that they need to harvest out of their state with a fall hunt, a lot of them just do that. And then some of it's historical precedents. A lot of the northern states just always had a spring season. The southern states never did. I mean, people down here in Arkansas don't even know people hunt bears in the spring. So some of it's just historical, they just kind of always did, so they still do, and they split their harvest management goals into spring and fall. But it just goes state by state, really. Is that a good answer, or do you have another clarifying question?
That answers it. I mean, I think I'm from Tennessee, so most of I think our population is about 7,000 bears the last time I heard, and nobody I know bear hunts. I mean, I'm in Middle Tennessee, and it's all in the mountains of East Tennessee, and I think it's mostly dog hunting, and that's what I always heard of anyway. And
yes.
I don't know that they do it any other way, really. That's, if you look through the guide that TWRA puts out, that's basically what they're talking about. So
yeah.
So I'm just curious because you're from the South, and I guess I watched your thing with was it First Lite, your video that came out. So I was kind of surprised you were even here. So anyway, that's kind of cool. But so I don't really know too much about bear hunting, so this is just all new to me.
Yeah. Man, I love Tennessee for bears. You ought to watch a film on the Bear Hunting Magazine YouTube channel called it's called On Laurel Mountain. That's the name of the film. I think the tagline is the best. Well, I can't remember the tagline, but anyway, it's a film we made in Tennessee about an old hound hunter over in Tennessee, and I think it'd give you a peek into that culture, because some of the richest bear hunting culture in the world is in East Tennessee. It truly is, and a lot of people don't understand it. And no, yeah, spring seasons, that's a tough one. Just it all has to do with how many bears that they need to harvest, and they can do it in the fall. They usually do it in the fall. And I think it has to do with law enforcement and regulation. Like if they can keep everything in one spot, it's a little bit easier to manage. That's the way the guys in Arkansas think. I've talked to our lead Arkansas bear biologist, and he laughs at the idea of a spring season. Like they're just not interested in it. Go ahead, Matt.
What percentage do these game agencies want to harvest of their population every year?
That is a fantastic question. Most bear populations grow naturally by 10% per year. So like if Tennessee had 7,000 bears, naturally that population would increase by about 700 bears a year. And so the next year you'd be basing that off of population of 7,700. And so, I mean, a bear population can double in like 10 years. I did the math for our Arkansas bears at one time. So most bear populations right now are being managed in the states anyway to try to stabilize populations. So they don't really want them to grow, because the bears are thriving all over North America, and there's only so much good habitat. They don't want them in people's backyards. So I would imagine that Tennessee's harvest goals are somewhere around probably 700 to 1,200 bears a year. I'm totally guessing based upon what you said about 7,000, but that's the way they manage bears here in Arkansas. They want to take out 10% of the bears, and but some bear populations. This is interesting. Hunted bear populations increase faster than unhunted populations. So somehow inside of a bear population, if there are animals being taken out, the litter sizes go up, and the sexual maturity of females, when they reach sexual maturity, it goes down. So it's pretty amazing. It's like they sense and understand that there is some stressor on it. It actually causes them to grow faster, which is, that's just interesting. Seems like you kill two birds with one stone. Keep the anti-hunters happy because we'll have more bears, and keep the hunters happy because we have to kill more bears to keep them stable.
when's the time to pull the plug on an area? Like if you're doing some glassing, you know, like if you don't see anything for one session or a couple days, you're going to go to a new area. When would
Are you talking
pull the
about
plug
out
up?
west, Colton?
Yeah, so like Montana or something. Like if you go to a spot, you pick it on the map. Okay, this looks like a good spot, you know. For a day you don't see something, are you pulling to a different area, or a couple days, or how do you determine that?
That is a fantastic question that I've learned the hard way. I'll tell you a little bit of my Western hunting history. The first year that I hunted in Montana, we backpacked in for 5 days, and we just camped out basically in the same spot. And my philosophy at the time was, this is a good area. If we stay here for 5 days, we're eventually going to see a bear. Well, after 5 days, we finally did see a bear, but it was too late. And I realized that we committed way too much time to that one spot when we were not seeing bears. Now my philosophy is to go into an area for a morning and an evening and maybe another morning, and then get out of there and go somewhere else. I mean, I like to... what I'm doing out west right now is hunting on my mules, and I'll carry enough gear for 3 days. So I'll take my mule and go back in, and maybe I'll get there midday, and I'll set up my camp, glass that whole day, or, till dark, and then glass the whole next day. And if I don't see a bear, I'm out of there going somewhere else. So I think you're on to something there with that question, is that the key is to move around, because you will find them. But you got to give it a chance, I mean, you can't just sit there for 3 hours and not see a bear and think he's not going to be there.
Right,
so I like three. I like a morning, evening, morning.
No, it's perfect. Yeah, I appreciate that, because, I just didn't know if to be more mobile. I mean, obviously in Michigan here, I'm in a tree stand or whatnot, and I go to that same bait because I've been baiting it for, 2 weeks or whatever. I know when the bear's going to come in and stuff. So, but yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Oh, Wes, what, spot and stock in spring, what time are the bears most active, or what time should you be starting, afternoon glassing, or, is that when they're most active?
I mean, bears are crepuscular animals. They're like a white-tailed deer. They're going to want to feed heavy, early and late, just like a deer. But you can see bears at any time of the day. But, I would focus really on that last 3 hours of daylight and really the first 3-4 hours of the morning. That's the key time you need to be glassing. Now, if you're on a backcountry hunt and you're glassing from camp, which is the ideal way to do it, is if you can camp in a glassing spot, then you're just kind of glassing all day, That's been my experience. It's just about like a lot of the other kinds of hunting, for big game, is that, first couple hours and last couple hours is going to be the time.
So this is Caitlin and Matt. We're in Utah.
Hey, guys.
Hi. My question was about digital scouting. So if you're not able to visit an area on foot before you go there to hunt, what are some of the top things that you're looking for a spring spot and stalk hunt?
Are you hunting there in Utah?
Idaho.
I think it depends on what kind of hunt you're wanting to do. If you're wanting to do a spot and stalk hunt, I think you've got to find areas with a lot of openings that you can determine that if you get up high, you're going to be able to see down into some valleys and on some, opposite slopes really well. Because like in Idaho, and it's the same way in parts of western Montana, is that sometimes it's just super, super thick. And, when you're looking at your Onyx or whatever, you can tell what is thick forest. And on a spot and stalk hunt, thick forest is just basically like a dead zone. That's where bears are. The bears are there, but you've got to have an opening to be able to kill them. So you've got to have some kind of natural big alpine meadow or a burn of some kind that's made a big opening. Another thing that a lot of people do, I've done it a lot in British Columbia, is walking these gated green roads in the spring. So from a digital scouting perspective, I would just say on a spot and stalk hunt, especially with a rifle, you just got to find those open areas. So what I would do is find some of these zones that have a high bear harvest talk to some biologists and find out where there's pretty decent bears, and then, numbers of bears. Sometimes bear harvest data is skewed based upon population centers that are close, if that makes sense. So, you might have just a bunch of people hitting this particular zone, so they're killing bears, and it gives the indication that there's a whole lot of bears there and there's not as many up here. But really, up here is just as good or better, just people aren't going there. So you kind of got to discern that data. But I would be trying to find the most secluded area that I could get to that had big openings. And if you were on foot, I like to get into the backcountry when I bear hunt. I sometimes think that hurts me probably because I had a good buddy in Montana that was kind of tutoring me in the way to hunt Montana. And he was like, dude, leave those mules at home and just drive your truck up here and drive around and glass, clear cuts and burns and stuff. And that's the way they hunt, and they do really well. And I just didn't want to hunt that way. I wanted to bring my mules. I wanted to backcountry camp and stuff. But I say that to say you kind of got to figure out what kind of hunt you want to do. And but you don't always have to get real deep in the backcountry to find bears. But just look for those openings. And you got to look at elevation too. Depends on when you're going to go. I've been going to Montana early May, and pretty much everything below 6,000 feet in early May has been greening up or starting to green up. And so, you would exclude anything like above that because, they're taking these satellite photos, obviously. It's not real time. Like, you might be looking at something that's covered in snow. So you kind of got to get a sense of where the snow line is for when you're going to go, and that snow line, and maybe not even the snow line, but the green up line. It's not always snow, but wherever there's green vegetation, that's where bears are going to be. And I like hunting early because it concentrates bears in certain areas. Later in the spring, when everything's greened up, bears are spread out. Early, they're concentrated. That's when I like hunting.
Clay, will you tell that delayed incubation story, or will you explain?
Oh, you messed it up, Bridget.
What
delayed
is it?
implantation.
Can you explain that?
Yeah. So I'll have to talk about the bear rut a little bit first, though. So the bear rut is this long window of breeding, and ungulate populations they have to have a certain conception date in order to get a fawning date, a arrival date. But bears have this big window. I'm trying to have this big window of breeding, and basically because bears are low density animals, they can be bred over this big 3-month-long period. With an ungulate, that would mean that you could have this wide span of when that little fawn was born. Ungulate ruts conception dates are determined by, optimal fawn survival in the spring. So bears, because they're a low density animal and they're spread out massively across the landscape, and a sow bear may not even run into a boar bear. She has this long estrus. And so she is bred, and the egg is actually fertilized, but it does not attach to the uterine wall until that sow bear has gone all the way through the fall, and her body determines whether she can rear young or not. So if she had a rough fall, that egg is just dissolved back into her system and she doesn't begin gestation. If she's had a good fall and she's fat and there were a lot of berries and life is good, then that fertilized egg will attach to the uterine wall and gestation begins right then. And so gestation usually begins in early November, and a bear gestation is 60 days, which is amazing for such a big animal. 60-day gestation. So bear cubs are born in the den in January, and they're hairless and weigh less than a pound. And so the mama, bears do not hibernate. That's a misnomer. Bears go into what they call a state of torpor, which hibernation is when you have like massive decrease in body temperature and heart rate, And the way I heard it best described was an animal that's in hibernation would be like digging a woodchuck up out of the ground in the dead of winter in Idaho. Like you could pick him up by the scruff of the neck and shake him and he wouldn't even wake up. A bear is actually quite awake throughout the winter. I've been on lots of den studies with Arkansas Game and Fish, and you crawl up to this bear den and shine a light in there, and there's a fully awake mama bear just looking at you. And but they're just chilled. I don't understand that fully, but they're just kind of relaxed. So the cubs are born in January, and then what's amazing that is a bear cub's back legs don't engage until it's about 3 or 4 months old. So you pick up a little bear cub out of a den, let's say in March when it's about 5 weeks old, and its back legs are totally limp. If you put it on the ground, it could run around with its front and it would just drag its back. And that is so that little sucker doesn't walk out of the den. I mean, it's immobilized for this period of time, and then all of a sudden, and I don't think it's really just all of a sudden, but by the time that spring comes, by late March, early April, they're fully engaged and they're little bear cubs that can go out with their mama.
Yeah, I plan on doing some still hunting in East Tennessee this spring, and I'm just curious about what kind of areas I should look for. Really playing the wind and all that, but just some tactics. I'll be near Cherokee National Forest.
Yeah, man. Hey, that's the kind of hunting that you're wanting to do right there would be almost identical to the hunting that I'm doing in Arkansas and Oklahoma, just trying to go out and find bears. Way better than I could answer you, which I will answer you, but we've got 2 podcasts that are it's probably 3.5 or 4 hours between the 2 of them, where we go extensively into hunting the eastern deciduous forest for bear. So I could find those episodes and figure out a way to send them to you. But really, you'd learn a ton, because it's not just me; it's some other guys that are really good talking on those podcasts. But here's the simple answer: man, hunt early. I don't know when your season there in Tennessee starts. I think it's in September. The way to kill these bears is you've got to find the mass crop. Typically, it's going to be white oak acorns that they're going to be focused on. And if the season opens before most of the white oak acorns are falling off the trees, you can hunt these bears while they're climbing oaks. A 350-pound black bear can climb a tree like a squirrel and tiptoe out on a limb and eat acorns off that limb. It's incredible. And they make a lot of noise. They leave a lot of sign during that time period. And so what you got to do is find the white oak acorns or whatever type of acorn is, that they're keying in on. But the key is that I would say if you took a 5-year period, there would probably be 2 or 3 years where it would be really good for that kind of hunting, and then probably 2 or 3 years where it would be not very good at all, because what you're looking for is some type of mast failure in certain areas, and a mast, where, and when I say mast, everybody probably knows what that means. Mast is like fruit production, nut production. For instance, in Arkansas, my best years are when there's no acorns down low and all the acorns are up high. So there was a frost or there was something that happened down low, no acorns, and then all of a sudden, bam, acorns are up high. And that pattern will be everywhere. So all the mountains, for the most part in your region, will have some, display some pattern of mass crop production. In years when there's acorns everywhere, it's super tough. Bears are spread out and you just almost got to get lucky. Years where mast is concentrated, it can almost be like hunting over a bait pile. I know a guy in North Georgia that wrote an article for us a few months ago. He said they saw 17 bears in one day in North Georgia hunting acorns, bears climbing oak trees. 17 bears in one day in a place where you can see 50 yards. That's incredible. So, and just cover a ton of ground. Man, the first bear that I killed in the National Forest here in Arkansas on purpose, it was before I had Onyx or was tracking anything, but just my calculations, I hiked about 34 miles before I ever found a pile of bear scat. And, that was over the course of many days of hunting. You just got to cover ground because bears key in on food source really tight, like way tighter than ungulates, I feel like. So if a bear finds a white oak flat up on top of a mountain, he will bed close to there, he'll eat there, he'll just pound it down. But he's not going very far. Deer key in on certain areas for sure and are patternable, but I feel like they're bedding, quarter mile away and coming in and feeding. A bear is just almost like sloppy and lazy, and he'll just like camp out on a food source. So that's good if you find him. It's bad if you can't find him. So you got to cover a ton of ground to find him. So, but yeah, we talk in depth about that kind of hunting in a couple of podcasts. I can't remember. I think it's episode 12 and 44 of the Bear Hunting Magazine podcast. I'm pretty sure.
I think I've listened to half of one of those. They're great, by the way. But I remember you talking about focusing in on working the ridges. Is that what you had mentioned before, or am I incorrect?
Well, so bears are going to travel the mountains just like all the other game. I mean, they're going to run ridge lines. They're going to cross mountains in saddles, which would be, if it was like a ridge line, like a low spot in the ridge. They're going to use funnels. Like over in East Tennessee, you probably got a lot of bluffs and stuff. Like wherever you would kill a deer in the mountains, you'd potentially kill a bear there too. So I wouldn't just limit it to ridge lines, but over where you're at, man, there's some steep, nasty stuff. I mean, ridge lines is probably where you would start. Just start walking ridge lines till you find a saddle with some bear scat in it, and then maybe go out from there and try to figure out where they're feeding. That's probably what I'd do.
So I was kind of got started hunting like you with dogs and hound dogs, coon hunting and bear hunting and then whatnot. And then my dad's side is from East Tennessee, so that's where that got started. And then they moved to Michigan, where I was raised. So very familiar with that terrain down in Tennessee, which some of my great uncles still have dogs and whatnot down there. And then, like with the thick cedar swamps up in the UP in northern Michigan, you almost got to have hounds to run them there, like you had mentioned. And then
right.
I've been out in New York City the last 16 years and upstate, like up in the Catskill region, not far from Woodstock there, there's several bears there where they have a early bear season, spring season too, to try to manage a population. And that's one way that I found, like up in the mountains and whatnot, where you'd mentioned like hunting like with the ridge lines or just kind of being all over. I've also had them where they're up in a tree and just jumped right out because they winded me, and also got to hunt up in New Hampshire quite a bit. And there's no baiting, but one method that I found that to use, and since I don't have any dogs or whatnot, but is like we do like. And the mountains they're not huge. They're probably like 2,000 feet elevation tops. That's like the peak up in the Catskills, right? Like you had mentioned, like we just kind of start out and do like a big horseshoe for like the whole day, and kind of work those ridge lines and whatnot. But so just to kind of go into where everybody else has and covered and different locations and whatnot. And since you can't bait, have you ever had any luck, or if you ever use them, like those bear scents?
Okay. Yeah, where it's legal, and I think you can use 2 ounces of. You'd have to check for sure before you did it, but I think you can use like 2 ounces of commercial scent to attract bears in New York. Man, absolutely. The commercial scents, and there's multiple really good companies. If it was legal to do that here, which it is not here, we cannot use any kind of scent or attractant on public land. But absolutely, what I would do is do my scouting, try to find where a bear was, and then put out some scent, and just try to draw him in. Now he's not gonna keep coming there every day. I mean, it's pretty much that scent is just gonna have the life cycle of that particular hunt for you, because a bear might come into some scent, and if there's no food there, he's not coming back. I mean, he's interested in gathering groceries, so you'll get him there one time. Now, you might get multiple bears coming in over the course of a few days. The other thing you could do is put out trail cameras and scent, just to kind of get an inventory of what's in the area. It's a pretty good idea. But yeah, absolutely. Northwoods Bear Products is what I use. Their Gold Rush is incredible stuff. And we use that on our bait hunts on private land here.
Okay.
Yeah, try it, man.
Yeah, I've used it. Those sets, throughout the years, and like especially when you're kind of like spotting it and stalking or whatnot, covering ground, and they tend to work pretty well, with my experience.
What you got to figure on is that if that bear can smell that scent and you're 20 yards from that scent, then he can probably smell you too. That's the problem. That's the problem. So you gotta, anyway, there's some challenges inside of it. But yeah.
And
good
then
luck up there, man.
Thanks. And then what type of calls, like bear calls, do you use those that much, like a varmint call?
I don't have a ton of experience calling bears. I have called. I've been involved in calling bears up out in British Columbia, and we just used a rabbit squealer, just a predator call, and just went to town blowing it as hard as you could blow it. And I've seen a bear come running in from 300 yards, and I've also seen a bear, we got it on film actually last year, absolutely not even raise its head to a predator call when we were 80 yards from it, squalling like crazy, and this bear didn't even lift its head to look at us. It was bizarre to me. I mean, you'd have thought it would have at least looked. So, man, calling is just hit and miss. In the eastern deciduous forest, it doesn't work nearly as well as it does out west, and I think that has to do with the bears in the east are pretty fat and healthy and usually have plenty of natural food. Bears in the west are stressed a little bit more for food at different times, so you can capitalize on that. They're a little bit more carnivorous. I hadn't really seen the research on that, but that's my guess. And so they do respond to calls a little bit better out west, seem to anyway.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering about kind of if you could talk about the differences that you see in spring versus fall hunting, both like in your approach, maybe like meat quality as well as like the fat, and that's about it.
Yeah. So basically, bears in the spring are gonna be quite lean, even though they'll have some fat on them, depending upon how they did. I mean, every bear's going to be different. Like I took some bear fat off of a bear that I killed in Montana early last spring, and it was a fair bit of fat on that bear. He did pretty good. Bears in the fall can just be roly-poly, ridiculously fat, especially a big one. I have found I can't tell the difference in the meat. I mean, and maybe it's because I'm not trying to, but I've heard people say, I've heard it both ways. I've heard people say, you don't want to eat a spring bear, and then other people say, you don't want to eat a fall bear because they're greasy. Man, to me, once you get the fat off of that meat, it's the same meat. You know, these animals don't have marbled meat like a grain-fed beef, you know, beef cow. You know, the only reason meat marbles is because those animals are genetically designed that way, and they are they're fed to obesity, and so wildlife is not that. It isn't fed like that. So, you know, the meat's not marbled, so the fat's not really in the meat. You know what I mean? So I've not found much difference between spring and fall bear. Some
Do you
people
see
say
any difference between the fat, as far as, obviously, like, there's a quantity difference, but do you actually see like kind of a quality difference or anything?
Man, that is an insightful question, and I have sought the answer, my friend. We actually did a test last year where we rendered fall fat and rendered my Montana spring fat, and we fried fish in both of the oils to see if there was a difference from this grass-fed Montana bear and this acorn donut-fed Oklahoma bear. And we could not tell a difference in the fat. You couldn't tell the difference the way it looked, the way it smelled, the way it cooked. No difference whatsoever. That's been my experience with it. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So I'm here in Montana, and we have a pretty high grizz population, especially where we hunt. Do you find that affects how the black bear feed, or is there really not a big impact?
That is a good question. I think it affects them a lot. I have not hunted in Montana extensively in really heavily populated grizz areas, but last year we hunted in British Columbia with a guy named Jeff Lander, who's in a big-time grizz area. And, I mean, we were seeing grizz. We didn't see them every day, but somebody was seeing grizz every other day just in our walkabouts. We were seeing grizz tracks. And it affects the black bears big time. They're way more skittish. Those black bears, we were spotting and stalking these black bears, and they were seeing us from 200 yards away. Like, they would spot us and run like deer. And that was totally foreign to me because, I mean, you know, I was used to bears pretty much not caring much about you until you get inside of 100 yards, maybe even 75 yards. You could just almost walk straight to them, some of the bears I've dealt with. But these bears were super skittish. I think when a grizz moved into an area, the black bears just were gone. So that we were hunting these big fields, and if the black bears were there, it was great. But the second that a grizz showed up, the black bear were just gone for a few days. So, yeah, I think it does affect them. But that's the only time I've hunted in real thick grizz country. It affects the way, you know, you should hunt. I mean, in terms of just being safe and ready and you know, carrying your bear spray. I like to carry bear spray and a sidearm. I don't pick one or the other. I don't care which one's better. I just want to survive if something happens. So, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Have you ever had any grizz encounters?
Yeah, I've been charged once elk hunting, and I was lucky it was a bluff charge because they're popped out of the shrubbery about 10 yards away and decided to run. It was, yeah, that went in my day quickly.
Wow. I saw a post on Instagram today that actually made my stomach literally turn. You guys may have seen it. It was a guy that got his face ripped off by a grizz. I mean, I'm not kidding. It was a live video. It was a hunter. Here, I'll tell you what. Well, you may or may not want to watch it. I've never seen anything like it.
Where did it happen?
So the Instagram page is Hunting the Northwest, all one word. That's the Instagram page. And it was a guy with his dad, and he took a series of photos. It's so gruesome. I'm not telling you should look at it. But, I mean, literally, this old man is standing in the snow. He's in camo. I mean, you can tell it's not fake, or at least my discernment told me it was the real deal. And they killed this grizz that was charging him, and literally the dude's face was ripped off. it put the fear of God in me again. I need that sometimes. There are some things I'm very naturally respecting of and have a lot of fear of. I mean, like good kind of fear, respect kind of fear. Black bears, I've just never had much. I've never had much just natural fear of them, and I think that's pretty common. Most hunters aren't afraid of black bears. But when I grizz hunted in Alaska, I was up there 2 years, 2 different times. Man, it's a different animal when you're up there. I mean, it's they easily gain the respect of anyone that's paying attention.
So I live up in the Northeast, Maine, New Hampshire, and we were thinking about doing a float hunt and just float down either Saco River or maybe the Connecticut River. And is that like too low for bear hunting, or what's your opinion on that?
I can't totally speak to that because I just don't know that country that well. I mean, if it was, Maine is an incredible state for bear. Really, I think they say there are 30,000 bear in Maine. Population's increasing. I would imagine if it's big national forest or state forest, I would imagine it's full of bears. It's super thick though, so hunting them, slip hunting, spot and stalk hunting would probably be a challenge.
Yeah, that's the idea with the float is you hope you don't have to break so much brush and just kind of catch them unaware.
Yeah, I would look at the county harvest figures, call a biologist and just say, hey, is this a good area? And it probably is. Most parts of Maine have a lot of bear. Man, the North Woods on a slip hunt like that is tough. It really is. It's tough. And I've never done that kind of hunt up there. But you would use the same kind of tactics. I mean, bears are doing the same thing everywhere. They're trying to gather groceries. So if you can find the food source, and I don't think they have oaks up there. So we talk a lot about acorns down here, green grass and berries and stuff out west. There's probably a lot of beech in Maine. Beech nut. Are there oaks up there?
Yeah, there's some, but it's more a lot of maple. So it's not so much acorns. It's more grass and stuff, but it's probably not so much close to the river. So maybe like take out and then hike up a ways.
Yeah. Well, I have heard people talk a lot about beech ridges in Maine. Now that I think about it, and in New Hampshire, guys keying in on beech. So you might look at that. A beech. Have you ever seen a beech nut? They're like a little bitty. It's like a little bitty, like pea-sized nut, but the game love them. But yeah, good luck with that, man. That sounds like an adventure hunt. Anyway.
So just kind of piggyback onto Jessica's question. Also here in Montana, southwest part of it, and grizzly bear country. But what you said, bears are kind of keying in on certain food sources. What are they keying in on spring bear season here? Just green grass, honestly.
I am not an expert at Western plant identification, so I honestly can't just tell you exactly what kind of plant that they're searching for, but they are searching for luscious, fresh, green growth. I think there's a part of the spring when they're digging up. I want to say it's arrowroot, like ARRO, maybe arrow. I can't remember, but
yeah, it's arrowleaf balsam root.
Yes. That and that's after a certain period when it's popping up. But what I've found is just whatever is green. I mean, and so the ditches, the roadsides, the valleys, the low spots are typically gonna green up first.
Right.
And the bears that I've killed have just been eating just grass and the little forbs, and so you're just looking for that fresh green.
Okay.
And, you know, probably I'm glad you asked me that question because I like to know exactly what bears are doing when I'm hunting them, just to know. And I do want to do some more research on the specifics of what they're keying in on, but they seem to be pretty non-selective from what I can tell.
Okay.
I mean, they're just mowing whatever they can get down there. Yeah, just that green stuff, man.
So rendering fat, can you just go through your process of that and then your favorite bear recipe?
Okay, good question. So when you're rendering fat, you just want to harvest as much of the fat as you want to take, but the good fat is on the rump usually. And a big bear in the fall can have, I mean, they literally, I'm not exaggerating, can have 3-4 inches of fat. And you just want to get some big, nice fillets of that fat. And you can freeze it just like you do the meat. You can just freeze it and then unthaw it. When it's about 3/4 unfrozen, that's when you want to cut it. If you let it totally thaw out, it's like a kind of a blob of greasy jello, you know, it's harder to handle. So cut it when it's about half frozen-ish. And best practice is to grind it up and then render it. You don't have to do that. You could just cube it up into like 1-inch cubes and cook it in whatever heat source you want. I mean, you can render it down on a stovetop, in a pan, in a cast iron skillet, in a fry daddy. That's what I use a lot, you know, like for frying fish and stuff. Propane stove, I've done it in a jet boil. And basically you're just kind of wanting to slowly heat it until it just renders down into a liquid. Now when you cube it, you're going to have some waste because it finally just renders down to a point where there's these solid chunks that just don't turn into liquid. So you have these little floaters. So you strain those out. So usually I'll take a metal funnel and put some cheesecloth down in that funnel and just pour that hot oil through the funnel, through the cheesecloth, because it'll have some little, you know, particles in it and crispy burnt stuff. And pour it into glass mason jars. I like to use the little pint jars. If I've got a lot, I'll use a bigger like quart jar, and just just put the lid on while it's hot and you're good to go. And that you can leave that jar of oil unrefrigerated for, I always say, up to 1.5 years. And the reason I have that date in my mind is one time I used some bear oil that was 1.5 years old, and I could tell it was starting to get a little bit of, it wasn't like rancid, like tasted bad, but I could tell it started to have a taste. And typically oil doesn't really have a taste. That's a good oil, is oil that you don't taste. And so you could start to, anyway, I think it'll stay good for 1.5 years just sitting on a counter, not even refrigerated. So that's the rendering portion. 1 pound of fat will render about 1 pint of oil. 1 pound of fat. And let me show you something. Hold on. Some people, different types of oil look different. This is a jar of bear oil, and you can see it's got all this white stuff, and it's got some clear liquid at the top. All of that is totally usable. I mean, you put that in a pan, and it just totally turns to just clear, heated oil. So don't worry about if it turns solid. That's what it's supposed to do. Yeah, I heard some people say, oh, do I just use the clear part? And different bears will render different. You might render a bear and he only has half of his oil is solid and half is just super liquid. And I've been told that has to do with what they've eaten. I do not know. I'm in search of that answer of why it's different. But favorite bear recipe, like I said, I'm not a chef, but man, I can cook some mean bear chili, and I could eat it every day of my life. My boys and my daughter River could as well. My wife and my oldest daughter cannot. I have totally burned them out on Newcomb bear chili. So much so that they're just not interested anymore. And it's not the bear's fault. It's just my fault for eating it like 6 days a week. But, now we use a lot of ground meat. bear chili, bear tacos, bear burgers. The bear ground meat is incredible. No off flavor. We have a lot of people to our house that aren't hunters, and man, I'll feed them bear meat in a heartbeat, and they won't even know. They'll think it's just whatever. My wife likes bear steaks the best. That's what she likes. And just simple. I mean, like I said, I'm not a chef, but I'll just cut like 1/4-inch steaks, tenderize it with a meat mallet, and just put some Montreal steak seasoning or whatever kind of seasoning you want. Cook it on a charcoal grill until it's done. All bear meat you want to cook till it's done. I mean, you want to cook it up at least to an internal temperature of 160 degrees. And man, it's good. It really is. I've never had bear meat that was just really gamey or anything. They say some of the bears that are eating fish and stuff taste gamey, and I believe that, but all the bears that I've had have not.
Yeah, perfect. Making me hungry now, but thanks.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, I thought it'd be a good idea, Clay, to kind of close this off by talking about, you've been talking about this a lot, guarding the gate. I think that'd be a good thing to end on, because I think it's a smart concept for a lot of folks.
Yeah. The idea of guarding the gate is that bear hunting is the hot button for the anti-hunting community. Really, like if we were looking at the whole picture of North American hunting, and if our goal as hunters was to preserve North American hunting, then you would identify the weak places, and a weak place inside of hunting is bear hunting, and it's not bear hunting's fault, and it's not really hunters' fault, but it's just the fact that bears are these, charismatic megafauna. Bears are anthropomorphized, so much inside of, it's so easy for the anti-hunting community to paint the picture of this bear as different than a deer, different than a squirrel, different than, these other game animals that we hunt. And so I feel like outdoor media, I don't feel like it, I know it. For years, it's almost been like the bear hunters have been like the redheaded stepchild of the outdoor hunting community. And I think a lot of hunters have just been like, if that went away, that wouldn't be that big a deal. If we lost that, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. And we bear hunt, we have to bear hunt in some ways that to some people are controversial. Hunting them with hounds, hunting them over bait. Like, I get it why people sometimes don't understand that. But in 2020, we have nothing left to give the anti-hunting community. We have nothing left to give. Like maybe in 1900, we had some stuff that we were doing that needed to be chopped off of the fair chase hunting world. Everything that we're doing today has been proven by 100 years of solid science and a thriving bear population in the midst of massive urbanization, massive urban sprawl. Like what we're doing is working for bears. And so the way we're managing them is working. We don't have anything left to give. So the whole point of it is that the weakest link in the chain is going to be the actual weakest link. And so what we're saying at Bear Hunting Magazine is we've got to guard the gate and fortify the narrative of bear hunters to be able to say why we hunt over bait, why we use hounds, how we use the bear meat. People don't know that we use bear meat. There was a study done, I think in 2016, big reputable organization, it said that 78% of Americans polled supported hunting if the animal was used for food. And if you go look on our YouTube channel at some of our videos that have a lot of views, people have no idea that we eat bear. And so, we're trying to strengthen the bear hunting narrative. And we believe that it's actually a really vital part to the whole picture, because the lowest rung on the ladder, if it gets knocked out, and, people that aren't in the bear hunting world may not realize it, but the trajectory of bear hunting is for it to be essentially the knees taken out from bear hunting by them reducing our management tools. It could happen, 5 years ago, I would have told you you'd be a conspiracy theorist to say something like this, but they're trying to take out bear hunting. There's no kidding about it. And but what happens when there's no more bear hunting? Well, the anti-hunting community is dead set on ending all hunting, and they're not shy about saying that, you know. And so we got to guard the gate, guard the lowest rung of the ladder, and then everything above it is safe. Essentially, that's guarding the gate. And so that's why I like to talk about bear hunting. I like to talk about the hard questions because I find that most people, if you have a reasonable and intelligent answer to why you do something, even if they don't understand it, they kind of get it, you know. And I think hunters have shied away from the bait thing and the dog thing, and so much so that it's almost like nobody even wants to talk about it. Well, I think we need to talk about it, because in a day like today, where we can't hide stuff anymore. Maybe in 1970, the bear hunters over in East Tennessee, it might have been better for them just to stay by themselves and not advertise what they were doing. In 2020, the world knows. And so somebody's got to tell their story. Somebody's got to interpret their world to a non-hunting world. And I think that interpretation comes as just the broader community, maybe even guys that aren't that passionate of bear hunters, begin to understand why we do stuff the way we do and are just supportive of it. So, you know, again, I'm a deer hunter and a turkey. I do all kind of other stuff other than bear hunting. But what I want to see is a more broad-based general support of bear hunting, even from non-bear hunters, because it's the lowest rung on the ladder, because it's the gate of the anti-hunting community. So when we are 4.5% of the population of North America or of the United States as hunters, we've absolutely got to unify. We've got to unify or we will crumble. And so, yeah, man, that's guard the gate.
Awesome. I appreciate that, Clay. And thanks for being here. Thanks for everybody for chiming in and being a part of this. I think the last question we'll end with too is, Clay, how can people get a hold of you if they're looking to understand a little bit more about your world, what you're working on, maybe just get in touch with you with some more questions? Yeah, sure. So, you know, everything that we're doing is branded as Bear Hunting Magazine. So, you know, the print magazine is Bear Hunting Magazine. It's Bear Hunting Magazine Podcast, Bear Hunting Magazine, Instagram and Facebook. And then on Facebook and Instagram, they can find me just at Clay Newcomb as well. So yeah, those are the main places. So awesome. Well, I appreciate everybody coming out. On behalf of First Lite and everybody, it's been great. Hopefully you learned something today, and wanted to thank Clay for being here, and we'll catch you guys all in the woods, hopefully. Yeah, my pleasure. Hey guys, good luck, man. Good luck out there. And yeah, thank you guys for being a part.